marijuana, and there is so much controversy surrounding medical marijuana. What are your thoughts on it?
Well, no question, a very controversial topic,
Yes.
and something I've had discussions with a lot of people for many years. It is, of course, it still remains illegal under federal law.
Right.
But as most of us know, many states around the country have, in recent years, made it at least partially legal.
May I stop you just one
Sure.
second? And as a person with no law background, obviously, I don't understand how it can be not okay from a federal standpoint, but be okay from a state standpoint. Can you explain that?
Sure. It's awfully complicated, but I'll try to give kind of the nutshell version.
Okay.
Congress sets law, of course, that applies to all 50 states and territories, and many years ago, Congress included marijuana as one of these, as a drug or controlled substance that is unlawful to grow, possess, or use.
Right.
Which of course includes selling, distributing, etc. However, each of the states can kind of experiment with what they think is appropriate within their own state borders.
Okay.
Okay, and so what has happened is states, I think starting several years ago, with Washington and Colorado, probably the two most well-known, which legalized marijuana for recreational purposes as well as medicinal purposes. Congress has essentially leaves to the states the ability to kind of decide what they're going to allow within their own states.
Okay.
And sometimes you end up with a conflict between state law and federal law, which is what we've got here.
Right, and I'm sure you deal with that.
Right.
So, for people out there, who are wondering, and this is me as well, is there, and have you seen, and I don't know the answer to that, is there a correlation between these states, states out there that are using the marijuana either for medicine or as recreational? Is there any data that shows any accidental injuries or, accidents from usage?
Well, I don't know the data offhand. I did look at one law review article earlier this year suggesting that the number of car accidents related to marijuana in the state of Washington has increased significantly since that state passed or legalized recreational use of marijuana.
Right.
Now, that may be only because they've started keeping track of whether marijuana is related or is involved in accidents or not.
Sure. Yes.
So it's not necessarily, it doesn't necessarily correlate to an increased use. The increased numbers may simply be a result of increased data tracking.
Okay, I understand. So going forward, is there, in your opinion, how should we track that correlation between them? Because the symptoms from medical marijuana, or marijuana in general, are what? Can you explain to our viewers what the symptoms are from marijuana? Is it very similar to being under the influence of alcohol, for example?
Similar in many ways.
Okay.
And when I was a prosecutor, I often prosecuted DUI cases in which marijuana or other drugs were involved.
Okay.
And marijuana causes drowsiness, sometimes can cause confusion. It, in many ways, inhibits one's or impairs one's driving ability, very similar to alcohol and other drugs.
Okay, it does.
It does.
All right. So is it safe to say that when the legal alcohol, where you're considered under the influence, you can achieve that same degree with marijuana?
You can, and it's measured a little bit differently
Okay.
because under Florida law,
Right.
to be guilty of driving under the influence, if it's alcohol related, then of course we're familiar with the blood alcohol level.
Right.
But there are two ways to convict somebody of driving under the influence in an alcohol related case.
Yes.
And that is if the defendant's normal faculties are impaired or is under the influence of alcohol to the extent his or her normal faculties are impaired, or if he or she has a blood or breath alcohol level above 0.08.
Okay.
Now, you can't quite measure the quantity of marijuana or other controlled substances in the blood.
Right.
But that same standard applies in that if you're under the influence of marijuana or any other controlled substance, you are guilty of driving under the influence if the evidence establishes that you are under the influence of that controlled substance to the extent your normal faculties are impaired.